when it's time to let somebody go at your company and how to do it the right way. That's what I'm talking about today on the Biz Chat. Hey, I'm Kyle Racky, and this is the Proposify Biz Chat. Today I'm talking about that uncomfortable word that nobody wants to talk about, that elephant in the room, firing. Growing a business is like growing a garden, and sometimes you need to prune, sometimes you need to pull up weeds, you need to remove what's not working. And unfortunately, sometimes that means letting an employee go. I'm going to tell you a story about when I was running my old agency, Headspace. The first person that I had to fire, and I've only had to do it 4 times total in my history so far as an entrepreneur. That was all at my old company, thankfully, never at Proposify. But the first time that I fired somebody, it was a developer. And when we looked at hiring our first developer, the first person that seemed pretty good, we had in for an interview. And let's call him George. George was exactly what we thought we wanted. He talked a really good game. He seemed awesome. And we just got really excited, and we hired him that day. We didn't check any references. We just said, yep, come on, you're on board. Now that proved to be a mistake. So after a couple of weeks, George had been given an assignment where he had to integrate Google Maps with our CMS, our content management system. And he had been working on the job for now a few weeks. He hadn't shipped anything, hadn't delivered anything, right? So I had been checking with him. Hey, George, how's it going? How are things, coming along? Are you going to be done soon? And it was always, maybe tomorrow, excuses why they weren't done, couldn't quite figure something out. And eventually we started getting really pissed. The client was pissed because it wasn't done. We were late on delivering this project. And eventually I just came in one Saturday to kind of look into it myself. And I'm not really a developer. But after 2 hours of Googling and reading an online tutorial about how to do this, I had it done. 2 hours, right? He'd been on the job for weeks. This was his only assignment. So I was happy the project was done, but I was absolutely pissed that George was dishonest and didn't just tell us, look, I can't do it. I'm not the right fit. So it was obvious we needed to fire him. That weekend I had removed all of his passwords and accounts from our system, and on Monday morning he called me up to say, hey, I can't log into these various company accounts. Am I fired? And that's when I delivered the news, yes, you're fired. It was uncomfortable. It was the first time I had ever done it, and I unfortunately had to do it a few more times throughout the course, and I learned a lot of things. Obviously our hiring process was all wrong. We didn't have a process, and that's what's changed since. So if you can avoid needing to fire somebody, that's always the best approach, by just simply not hiring them in the first place. Weeding out bad hires means you don't need to fire anybody. How do you hire correctly? So there's a lot to that, but I think that really it comes down to culture and skills. So when you're hiring somebody, you're really trying to figure out, are they right for us culturally, and do they have the skills to do the job? And I think culture is actually more important than skills. Of course, skills are important too. So how do you actually hire for culture? I think of, even when you're a small company, maybe it's just you or your business partner and you haven't hired anybody yet, really you as the founder set the culture, right? Your personality, the way you see the world really is going to become the culture for the company. It's the prototype. When you look at your culture, you have to think about, you don't necessarily need somebody who's your twin, your doppelganger when it comes to personality, but somebody who reflects various aspects of your personality. If you're a bigger company, you'll probably have all those cultural aspects written down and documented, so it's easier for other people doing the hiring to say this person is or isn't a cultural fit. Now, when it comes to skills, you need to really test people out and make sure they can actually do what they say they can do. People lie on their resumes all the time. So what we do is we actually test applicants. If somebody gets further along in the interviewing process or in the application process, we always send them some kind of test. So for developers, we actually have them come in for their interview, and they actually need to write a handwritten JavaScript test to make sure that they really understand the language on a lower level than just kind of basic jQuery stuff. There's a lot of ways to test to make sure somebody is going to be the right fit for you. And if you do all of this, then hopefully as they start being onboarded and working in your company, then they're going to adapt and grow with you, and you're not going to have to let them go. So naturally, as you grow your company and as your team grows, there's always going to be some issues. We're people, we're humans, right? Sometimes somebody's going to say something the wrong way, somebody's going to get annoyed, there's going to be maybe disputes between people. You know, these things happen, and they're not a reason to instantly fire somebody. So if somebody's who's otherwise a good employees on your team is acting out, or maybe their work isn't at the quality that you're usually expecting from them, then it's time to talk to them, you know, just one-on-one, privately, and just see what's going on. Take an interest in people, you know, because sometimes they have things going on in their lives. We all do, right? And as much as we try, we can't help but bring some of that baggage to work with us, right? You're breaking up with a spouse, your mother's going in for surgery, you lost a relative. There's all kinds of different personal reasons why people don't act themselves. And so what people don't need is a boss, a disciplinarian. What they actually need is a mentor and a coach, and somebody who looks at the reasons behind why they sometimes disappoint us, right? So talk to them first. Now, if you're finding that there's a pattern of behavior that's not changing, especially very serious things, right? Like pissing off a client, missing deadlines repeatedly, being openly disrespectful. These are all reasons why you would want to, first of all, document that stuff, sit down with the person, talk to them about it, talk about specifically what they did and how they did it on this date, and that it's not, they're not living up to your expectations. Now, let's talk about cause for a minute, because you always hear about firing with cause, firing without cause. What does that mean from a legal standpoint? It's actually very difficult to prove cause. You know, cause might be something like, you know, writing racist statements on social media, or physically attacking somebody at work, or sexually assaulting them, or something that's very serious, usually a crime, something that's super easy to prove in court. Now, most of the time, people are fired without cause. It's not that black and white. It's like they're not meeting expectations, they're coming in late, or their work isn't up to the level of quality you expect. All those are very fuzzy, gray, subjective things, and that is firing without cause. So you can fire without cause. Now, you'll need to look up in your own province or state what the laws are in terms of how you can do it, when you can do it. But generally speaking, you need to give people some notice, or you need to pay them in lieu of notice. So if you want them gone that day, then you need to pay them for a couple of weeks or a month or whatever, depending on your local laws. So let's say you've documented, you've talked to the employee, you've said you want to see improvements made, and then there's no improvements made. You know they're not going to be a fit, they're not going to get better, at least with you, and so now you have to let them go. Now, here's how you can do it the right way and some things to keep in mind. First, again, look at local laws, make sure that you're doing everything legally. Usually you have to have a termination letter that's dated, so it's very clear when the last day of termination is. You would want to make sure that you protect the company, so you never know if somebody's going to do anything kind of stupid or emotional, maybe try to sabotage the company, so you'd always want to make sure that before you have that conversation, you've locked them out of any key accounts that they could do some damage with. And then, you know, you also want to protect their dignity. So you don't need to do, of course, never do it in front of anybody else. Always one-on-one conversation, preferably in person, if assuming they're not remote. And you just want to have that conversation and not really, you know, bring it down to name calling or getting angry or getting heated or anything like that. You need to be very direct with people. So don't hum and haw, don't beat around the bush, make it, you know, give them some kind of false hope that this isn't, you know, this is a maybe. This is final, this is completely decided upon. So don't leave any areas for assumptions or gray areas. It's like, this is the final decision, you're gone, right? And so you can do it in a kind way. You can say, hey, we've had these conversations. I still haven't seen much improvement. I don't think you're a right fit for the company, and I'm sorry, but need to let you go. And then kind of talk through the logistics. Some people might want explanations more. They might want to know more reasons why. And you can give those, but I wouldn't get involved in a long rabbit hole of a conversation which isn't going to go anywhere, because people just aren't going to agree with most of the reasons why you want to let them go. So, let's just end it and move on. And when you fire, you need to do it quickly. You can't delay. You can't say, hey, I've got too much stuff going on, or this is uncomfortable, so I want to put it off and kind of procrastinate on it. I really advise you to just do it as soon as you know it needs to be done and not delay. People who are on your team are A players. That's who you want to hire. They don't want to work with B players or C players. And so even though people get close, if somebody really isn't the right fit, then the rest of your team will understand. And if you follow this advice, then hopefully firing is going to be a rare occurrence and something you don't have to do too often. So I hope you like these tips. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play to get more content like this every week. And I want to hear your questions. What are you struggling with in your business? What do you want to learn about? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.